Due to the government's guidance on social distancing, members of the press and public will not be able to attend this meeting, and the meeting will be available to watch live at www.thurrock.gov.uk/webcast www.youtube.com/user/Thurrock Council. I'm going to move, straight to item 1, apologies for absence. I've got no apologies for absence, but we're joined remotely by Councillor Hoolin and Councillor Mays. Can you just confirm that you can hear what's happening in the chamber? First of all, Councillor Mays, a thumbs up is fine. Councillor Hoolin? Excellent, thank you very much. The normal process will apply. If there's any discussion, that will take place in the chamber first of all, and I'll invite members remotely to say their piece. So move on to item 2, which is the minutes of the meeting, which are found between pages 5 and 14. As I was absent, I'll need to know if this is a true and accurate record of the minutes. That's agreed. Thank you very much. Move to item 3, items of urgent business. I've not agreed to any items of urgent business this evening. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in the chamber? None. Any declarations of interest remotely? I've got 2 shakes of the head, so I shall take it as no declarations of interest. Move on to item 5, which is statements by myself. As many of us would have seen, Essex County Council has made an application to the government to voluntarily increase its COVID alerts status to high and be subject to the Tier 2 COVID restrictions. This would mean that residents would not be able to meet anyone outside of their household or support bubble in any indoor setting, such as a pub, home or restaurant. They should aim to reduce their journeys and indeed also to avoid using public transport where they can. I'm sure that everyone will recognise what an impact this would have on certain businesses, especially those in the hospitality and entertainment venues, what it would mean for families with different homes across Essex who wouldn't be able to meet unless they're in part of the same bubble. And it would also obviously restrict travel to and from those places. I'm sure we can all see the impact this may well have on those who already feel isolated and alone, as well as the impact it may have on some residents' mental well-being. On this, I've spoken to the Secretary of State for Health at the weekend, outlining why I feel that Thurrock should not be subject to these extra restrictions requested by Essex County Council, and we will continue to resist any call for voluntary increases on the restrictions to our residents. I'm very pleased to say that MP Jackie Doyle-Price also made this clear at Parliament yesterday, that Thurrock should not be included in this county call for more restrictions, something for which I'm truly grateful and I'm sure everyone else will be. As soon as I'm made fully aware of the decision of government in relation to Essex County Council's call for extra restrictions, I will make it clear to everybody what this will mean for our residents depending on the outcome. A number of councillors and indeed residents have asked what will be happening as we approach Remembrance Day. As you would imagine, this year's Remembrance Parades are not going to take place as normal. But with the need for us all to continue to socially distance, avoid crowds and a maximum number of people who can attend in groups, we are exploring all different options to commemorate Remembrance Sunday and indeed Armistice Day itself in the same way that we did earlier this year with VE Day and VJ Day. Private services and virtual tributes will replace traditional parades to commemorate and remember the British and Commonwealth military, civilian men and women who paid the ultimate price in 2 world wars and indeed later conflicts. Online tributes will be shared on Thurrock Council social media channels on Sunday the 8th of November and Wednesday the 11th of November, and a collaborative project with Thurrock Museum will showcase photographs from the museum's collection online in the week leading up to and at the anniversary dates this year. A special red, white and blue light display will also be put on the outside of the Thames complex in Grays to mark the occasion. I would encourage everybody to please stay safe when they honour Thurrock men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country, by ensuring when you do attend to lay a wreath, you do so following government guidance, and you do so safely, and you do so looking after yourself and others. I know I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I feel with the new tiers that have been announced by government yesterday, that there is the very importance to adhere to the regulations that government and regulations that government are giving in relation to people staying safe. So apart from the wearing of masks, regular washing of hands, and keeping the right amount of social distancing, we should all use our common sense to make sure that we are staying safe as we go through into the winter and into the Christmas period in a few months. But I'm also going to raise this again. Although it's important that we all wear face masks and coverings when we're in enclosed spaces and where it's required, it's also important that we show respect for one another, whether it be locally or should we still be able to travel elsewhere. We must remember that not everyone can wear a face mask, and some are exempt from wearing one due to physical illness, to a disability, mental health issue, if they're age under 11, or indeed some other medical conditions. But we must remember some of these reasons to be mask exempt are not visible. That doesn't mean they are not real. I would ask everyone to please bear this in mind if they see someone without a face mask on, and show tolerance for those that are exempt. There are a number of different mask exempt badges. They're not required by law. They can be downloaded and printed from the government website, should that be required. But as I say, they're not required by law. But if you are mask exempt, please consider wearing one. We must also be careful how we dispose of face coverings. I'm sure we've all seen this, and I've certainly seen it today. A number of face coverings and gloves littering the floor again. Ideally, we should equip ourselves with reusable face masks, which can be worn and washed and then worn again, which are far kinder to the environment. But if you do or must wear the disposable masks, they must be disposed of in a proper litter bin as part of the general waste at home. They should never be discarded on the street, and they should be disposed of, and they should not be disposed of in the recycling bin, as they are not recyclable. It's very pleasing to announce the joint operations that Thurrock have been doing with Essex Police. Last week, a drug driver was convicted and fined and banned for driving for 2 years, thanks to the joint initiative carried out by Thurrock Council enforcement officers and Essex Police. He was one of those people who were caught as a result of the joint initiative which took place between August and December last year, to target those people who lit the borough's car park with nitrous oxide canisters. Those who remember, I took part in the first evening of that. It was really good to see the police helping us and us helping the police, and that led on to a number of extra convictions for other offences. Part of that operation resulted in 11 fixed penalty notices for fly tipping, 15 fixed penalties for antisocial behaviour, including littering, urination in public and fly posting. One, as we've just heard, the man was arrested for drug driving and in possession of drugs. 10 community resolutions for cannabis possession, and 30 community protection warnings were issued for antisocial behaviour. Another notable success is also the jailing of a drug dealer under the gang injunction in Thurrock. This criminal thought he could flout the terms of the injunction, as found to his cost that he was not correct. He will now spend the next 20 weeks in prison, and that's for 20 weeks that this person will not be there destroying the lives of our residents and those that get caught up in this. Thurrock Council will, of course, continue to work closely with Essex Police, and will continue to get these kind of results to make our borough safer and a much nicer place for the majority of decent, law-abiding residents who live here. Obviously, as we know with the pandemic and the issues we have now, this hasn't stopped our officers working with Essex Police, and I'm hoping as the months go on, I'll be able to announce other successes. Finally, clean it, cut it, fill it results. Filled potholes, 1,776. Again, every one of those in timescales agreed. 1,700 tonnes of litter lifted from our streets. Cleared 776 fly tips and issued 1,935 fixed penalty notices for antisocial behaviour like spitting, littering and dropping cigarette ends. That completes my very quick announcements. Councillor Cockshaw.
Yeah, I know you've mentioned about the change of the tiering this week, and I'd just like to put on record, obviously you've not mentioned yourself, the great work you've done over the last week, and the great work of our Chief Executive. I've been since last Thursday of making sure that we are not Essex County Council, and I think it's confusion sometimes to our residents that we are a unitary authority, completely separate as not a district, and the hard work that the public health team here in Thurrock and our Chief Executive have done since last year to make that right clear to Public Health England, the Secretary of State rang you personally, I know, and I must put it on record that thank you for the hard work that you've done over the last week to make sure that our residents keep to Tier 1, and we're led by data, and we're led by our great public health team and our officers to actually decide when it's good for our residents.
Thank you for saying that, Councillor Cockshaw. It's very true. The amount of extra work outside of ordinary office hours, for want of a better term, that's been put in by the constant conversations that Chief Exec and I and others had on Sunday in relation to this, the many out-of-hours conversations, emails and discussions we've had to have, not just with Chief Executive and the Director of Public Health, but also with Councillor Holden, Councillor Mays and Councillor Ralph in relation to COVID response. Our Director of Public Health has been an absolute star in this. The conversation we had with Public Health England, we received praise from them, which was absolutely fantastic for the work we're doing to do our utmost to keep our COVID infections low, despite the fact that we are still seeing many positives that are coming through. It's very difficult on a day-by-day basis to work out what the data is because there's a lag from test results going in and being logged onto the right day. So bearing in mind some of the hindrances, the information that I get from Ian, to form our opinion is absolutely fantastic. And one of the things I really appreciate, and I think is appreciated across the board, is that he will not predict what's going to happen tomorrow or what's going to happen the next day or the next day, because unfortunately we just can't. What we can do is to work with the data that we have, work with the data that we know is accurate, and to see whether we feel now or at some point in time we may need to ask to move to the next level. That's something that we're having discussions with, again, into the late hours of the evening to clarify, and when we're in a position to obviously share that one once we've universally agreed the right way to go, then that would obviously be shared with Cabinet, indeed other members, and indeed our residents. It is refreshing, as I said, to see that. Unfortunately, we've seen from elsewhere predictions, whether that be nationally or indeed close to locally, that don't quite meet up to the mark. So yes, whether it be the graph that was appeared on nationally a few weeks ago, or indeed Essex's predictions, we're not seeing them. Yeah, Essex, just in case I got that wrong. And that's the County Council. That's not ours, and that's indeed not Southend. It's also a unitary, who can also hopefully make their own decisions in relation to this. But it's Jackie Doyle-Price MP made clear yesterday about the close working here and indeed with the MP's office, which I'm sure does happen elsewhere, but perhaps not at the professional level that we enjoy here. So with that, I also pass my thanks on to all officers and indeed members involved for the huge amount of work that's gone into this, not just over the past couple of days, but indeed the past couple of months. So I'm going to move on to briefings on policy, budget and other issues. Do any members in the chamber, first of all, have any briefings on policy, budget and other issues? Do either of the members who are joining us remotely have anything? I've got two shaking heads, so we'll do that as agreed. Moving on to item 7, petitions by members of the public.
Thank you, Chair. No petitions.
Thank you very much. With no petitions from members of the public. I'm going to move on to questions from non-executive members. We have no questions from non-executive members, sorry. And then we have matters referred to us to Cabinet for consideration by Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which I think we're going to cover in the next item, which is the waste strategy. So with that, I'm going to move on to item 10, which can be found on pages 15 to 54, which is the waste strategy update. Apologies, I forgot the word update. And pass over to you, Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Leader. Myself, I'm a little bit surprised I didn't receive a single question this evening from non-executive members, but there you go. I would firstly like to thank the cross-party waste strategy working group for the work they have done, and it is only appropriate for me to name those members: Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Ralph, Councillor Van Day, Councillor Maldoni, Councillor Smith, and also the previous members, Councillor Collins and Councillor Akinbowen. To ensure something which affects every single resident in the borough would get the support and input it should, a cross-party working group was created to allow the three main political parties in Thurrock, Conservative, Labour and Thurrock Independents, to work together to create a new waste strategy they could collectively agree on, with the sole aim based on improving recycling figures. This group worked independently with a pure recycling focus. We as a borough do need to improve our recycling rates. These have been deteriorating at a rapid rate since 2014, and we need to be hitting the government guidelines of 50%. We have trialled many different schemes over the previous 4 years in an attempt to try and educate residents, and will continue to do so and continue to introduce the new schemes, such as the now being rolled out communal recycling projects. And of course, collectively, recycling plays a big part in our climate agenda. It was only in November last year, Thurrock Labour voted for a motion about climate change, backed by the independent group, and brought into policy which this administration, under Councillor Mays, is adopting and improving, not just our emissions or air quality, but our overall green agenda. The cross-party working group have been working on this waste strategy for over a year and have discussed numerous ideas, conducted a borough-wide consultation back at the start of 2020, with £30,000 worth of investment going into that consultation and promoting it, and delivered a waste strategy to CGS on October 1st. However, since going to CGS over the previous 2 weeks, it is clear that there are questions emerging from residents about the proposed changes. And in order to inform a decision, I've been requested that this item will be deferred until the November Cabinet, where the report will come with the information which has been shared with the working group to further promote what the strategy entails.
Okay, excuse me. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Watkins. And just to confirm that you are deferring this item to the next Cabinet in November.
That's correct.
Excellent, thank you. In that case, with that, we will move on rapidly to the next item, which is the procurement of electrical services, which is a report of Councillor Johnson. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Leader. And not procurement of electoral services as I first read it and wondered what was going on. This report comes to Cabinet as the current electrical services contract is due to expire on March the 11th next year, and therefore it is our intention that any new contract should commence on the 12th of March 2021, with a proposal that the contract term is 5 years plus an option to extend for a further 5 years. Using current annual costs for service, repair and testing, the potential full 10-year period of the contract will be circa £12 million. The report includes a timeline for the procurement and award, and I'm pleased to note that the Excellence Panel will yet again be invited to participate in the tender evaluation process. The contract's aim is to meet corporate priorities through delivery of high-quality services, whilst ensuring best practice is followed in line with the applicable regulations, including this Council's electrical safety policy. The tender documents will be set out using the Council's social value framework and will typically look at the provision of apprenticeships and the use of local suppliers, with the proposals subsequently incorporated into the contractual requirements. That's it, Leader. I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I would ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations on page 55, please.
I have a whole list of questions here. Thank you very much, Cabinet. First of all, any questions in the chamber? None. Any questions at home? None. I've just got to my list. No, I haven't got a list. The good thing is, as always, is to see that the Excellence Panel are included. It was, when I had a portfolio, it was actually great working with them. They really are a fantastic group. And for, I'm sure, the thousands of people are watching this as we speak, if you are in a council property, please feel free to make an application to join this group. The more diverse, the better, rather than it just being a group. Whilst it is across the borough, does have a particular age demographic. I know that's changed since I was had the portfolio, but it's a well worthwhile thing going on. So with that, as previously shouted out, do I have agreement for the recommendations on page 55 at 1.1 and 1.2? Chamber, agreed? At home? Yes, that's unanimously agreed. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to item 12, which is the medium-term financial strategy update and general fund budget implications. Councillor Hebb.
Thank you, Leader. Councils across the nation are presenting challenges as a direct and indirect result of COVID-19. And as we have always said, Thurrock is simply no different. Rational thought leads itself to few conclusions that things will never be the same and that things are going to have to change. Recessions do one thing to most people in the same way. They recalibrate perceptions around want and need. What is really important, or what is really just an intense desirable, or worse still, how do we achieve and secure just what we need to do? Now, Thurrock has a nest egg of sorts. It's been built up from a prudential financial planning and policy. Its usable reserves position has increased by 131% since 2016 levels, and as a direct result of the policy of reforming services and the members' agreed investment approach, or specifically from the returns of that approach, have given us. I defy many to tell us, or me, that we've expected an international pandemic in 2020. It is a rainy day, certainly, but one that no one probably honestly believed could ever happen in the scale that it has. And we can be thankful now, Leader, that we have something to fall back on. And it is something that other councils don't necessarily have. But it will not solve the problem. It will give us a temporary let. Collection fund losses are accounted for in the years ahead, and such a spike in reduced collections and increased benefit claims has to be paid. That is not just a national government problem. Further spending pressures are not just what we are having to do and spend above our usual commitments, but our reactions to fighting back the impacts of the virus on our people and our community, but the indirect too. Unemployment, market slowdown, and in some areas, notably hospitality, markets have almost ground to a halt. Elements of our capital strategy have had to be paused. Cabinet are in the process of working with our Directors Board to review the timescales of capital initiatives not yet started, replanning for the life after scenario, and some plans will be cut altogether. I've always said that members should remember that where there is a market and where it exists, and while it was there, that we would no longer have to make reforms which would be at a more considered pace, or we would have longer, to make reforms which would be at a more considered pace. New investments is not something this council is going to do. The market is simply not what it once was, for a number of reasons. Whilst existing investments continue to yield exactly as designed before COVID, there are finite life scales of those investments, and as such, when they conclude and we no longer realise the income for services being maintained at an enhanced level like today, nor will the ability to pay for additional priorities that we have funded through the financial plan we all signed up to. Our plans have led to an increased reserves to weather the storm ahead. They've allowed us to tidy this borough up. They have allowed us to fund mental health reform. They have allowed us to invest in our children's social care market. They have allowed us to fund extra police in our borough. However, as I said, while the market existed, we would have longer to make the reforms, but at a more considered pace. Leader, we have decided that even with everything going on, we have ring-fenced the spending commitment on the police, and the investment in the environment and social care was used to provide one-off support to helping them stabilise and operate at a higher level. Outside of that, we will now need to advance the plan that we were part way through anyway, but now at a far prompter pace. Revising the council service offer more closely to other boroughs across the country and thus the size at which it operates today. We are going to become a smaller council, it has to be. We believe strongly in a regeneration-led objective to help stimulate spending and recovery, and that is why we're putting £1 million into the house building objective and supporting a third stage of the local plan refresh. That is why Councillor Coxall reported last month on the economic development objectives of this borough. I've already said that our reserves position will help, and it will beyond measure. My portfolio holder peer group across finance, across the Essex area, met a couple of weeks ago to help shape the approach being put forward by local government in the Essex area to the government. We don't always agree on everything, but every now and then we do. The government have now advanced or announced a further £1 billion of support to local government for regard to the pressures from COVID-19. We remain in anticipation. We clearly await detail. That, again, may help pressure, but it won't fix it. I should love for an earlier settlement position to be announced from government, and we do live in hope in that. Again, that won't fix everything, but it will give a degree of certainty around RSG positions to allow for more informed financial planning and modelling. But let's be frank, no one could blame the Majesty's government for not being able to meet the usual timetable. The situation that we're all living through, which none of us have lived through before, is evolving rapidly. And so whilst we hope for an earlier settlement, we also empathise that that is a very hard thing to do for the national government. But in the meanwhile, action has to be taken, and action has begun. As people leave roles through retirement or moving on to new opportunities, vacancies, unless critical, will not be replaced. I've said it before, and I will urge it again. Discussions like these are uncomfortable, not just for service users, but for employees of this authority. This will lend itself to office and shop floor pressures, and the Cabinet are looking at council management to review operating models to accommodate those changes, and we sponsor you in doing so. And through Directors' Board, issues will come forward to Cabinet for review and escalation. Councillor Coxall's department has been completing an assets review in the spirit of fewer buildings and better services. A rationalisation of the asset estate is something that we need to do. Spending taxpayers' money propping up and maintaining a estate, which could be better utilised as identified under the retained reuse and release scheme, is something that is needed. And I will close on this. Councillor Hooling's report at Council attracted widespread coverage for her thanks to Council staff during the pandemic first half year. And fair play to the press for promoting that message, and her words are echoed, I know, not just by all of us here, but across the entire Council membership as also. But when people are not replaced in departments or your business, it can create workplace difficulty. It can feel like those left behind have more to do for the same. It's the same across the public sector. It's certainly the same of the private sector. And I dread to think what it's like in the hospitality sector at the moment. And I know that fact doesn't make it any easier to hear. But converse to that, what you must know is that it is appreciated more than you could probably or possibly realise. And I will look to the CEO to, again, reaffirm our thanks to the staff for everything they have been doing and what they'll continue to do in the coming weeks, months and probably years. What pulls workplaces together in times like this is a shared sense of pride and passion for reorganising to support the people to whom we serve. It is why we do what we do. The coming days, weeks and months and years are not going to be easy. But we know that with the same sense of shared effort like we saw so strongly in the first few months of the pandemic, when our nation pulled together, we can overcome and we can rebuild. Leader, I put forward the report and the recommendations within.
Thank you, Councillor Hebb. Has anybody in the chamber got any questions or statements? I'm looking at everybody. I see nothing. Either councillors remotely? I see a shaking head from Councillor Mays. Councillor Hooling, shaking head as well. Councillor Coxall.
They all groaned. Will I just point out, I know Councillor Hebb mentioned about the assets strategy. It's important that we refresh our assets. It's been many years since we have a good price of our assets. And going forward, this is obviously speeded things along a bit with the new crisis. But obviously, we've always had the 3R strategy since we come in administration. And it's important that we do look at to deliver our proprietors fewer buildings, better services. But inside that would be even more important nowadays, that we can deliver better services in a new way. And I can't get away from that. There will be new ways of delivering services, but that could be certainly better services. And what's happened in the last 6 months has felt that. And I think people there's ways of doing digital delivery of services. Then I think it could be better. It doesn't always go to the other way, that this means that there's a less of a service that the council gets in. It's just a different way of delivering these services that does have better outcomes sometimes. But we have got to look at our assets, and you may, if you come in for a few months to see why we're selling this, why we're doing this, why we're closing that building. Well, it's not that. It's delivering services that the community wants for the 21st century, not services that we had in the 20th century.
Thank you, Councillor Coxall. Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Hebb?
Yeah, merely to echo and sponsor everything Councillor Coxall just said. Fewer buildings, better services, a tried and tested model. We saw that with children's centres, as we well know. Against significant opposition, we've now got a suite of assets which, let's take the word assets out because it sounds so corporate. A service that residents use is now touching 90% of people and parents rather than 60%. And I remember pointing at that room over there and saying, I don't care less where my daughter goes, provided she gets the right skills in a decent building with the right competence and people with care. That works. Fewer buildings, better services is a tried and tested model pre-pandemic, and it will be tested and proven only further in the forthcoming months. So totally echo Councillor Coxall's point.
Thank you, Councillor Hebb. You actually touched on something I was going to say, which was obviously the children's services aspect. And I'm sure that there may be many that would normally sit in this chamber but can't because of current restrictions, and indeed others that wish to comment on this that will turn this into, where will the axe fall or whatever. But we've got to be quite realistic, and we'll use children's services the children's centre, as a prime example. A number of fixed assets that were barely used. Now we've got 90% of those that would be that we should being reached out to because it's being done in a completely different way. As been said a number of times, nobody expected a pandemic. No one expected council offices across the country to be constantly closed. I've spoke to many other local authority leaders who feel that they just can't get on with the job in the same way that they did. But we seem to be doing okay. We don't get every single phone call answered in the same way that we did before. We don't do exactly the same as we did before. But we've shown, both from a resident's point of view and from a council point of view, that we can change our services and do it in a better way that actually does require fewer buildings. But I want to touch on something that Councillor Hebb said when he said, about the asset strategy. We have that. We have the excellent work that the finance team are doing to try and balance books. On top of that, we've got every director now trying to see what they can do to save money. We've then got on top of that local government reform. We've then got on top of that the instant COVID response that was been pretty much thrust on us outside of our boundary from Essex, and the County of Essex, Essex County Council, you're quite right, Councillor Coxall, and a whole myriad of other things. And we're doing that at a pace. So it really is congratulations. It's the bits that people don't see, probably outside of Cabinet or indeed some elected members, that the amount of extra work that's been put on our senior team and indeed the teams below them to feed that information in. So again, as we echoed before, not just for the COVID, but for all of the work that's being done here, we thank our officers tremendously. I'm also going to say, our government has given local government a huge amount of taxpayers' money in advance to try and help fill the gap caused by the pandemic and the issues that fall out of it. Unfortunately, and I never thought I'd say that, it's not enough to fill the gap. But equally, I don't think that our government should be giving us more and more taxpayers' money in advance to do that. We all need to tighten our belts across local government. But I can assure you, on every given occasion, I bang the drum, as I did indeed early this morning, so afternoon, on a call with my colleagues in the Unitary Councils Network about different aspects, and I'm not going to go into them because they're too long and uninteresting, on how government could consider doing things differently to allow us to keep the money we've got, to better use the money we've got, to money that we've planned to get in over the future, but for that to be taken into consideration, and perhaps government to look for grant in a different way to sort of try and support local authorities. It's not just Thurrock in this situation; it's every local authority. The only thing I'm in a way pleased about, and it's a shame that if we think back to a year ago, where I'd go to meetings and it was like, what's the yearly deficit? Oh no, we've got surpluses. Unfortunately, those days have gone. But the fact that we had surpluses means we're not anywhere near as dire straits as we could have been. 40% increase in reserves that we could use as a temporary stopgap. And as Councillor Hebb said, this is a rainy day. This is possibly the most rainy day local government could ever expect. But we can't just dip into that all the time. We do need to make those changes, which is really good that we are doing this. And indeed, officers are playing their part and saying, okay, right, this is what we need to do to reduce the offer from to reduce the service to a point where we can sort of maintain those services, but equally to change those services so we don't have to supply as much or it'd be so expensive to supply. So before I move to the recommendations, Councillor Hebb, you want to come in?
Yeah, no, just closing off on a point that you were just talking about in regards to reserves leader. I think you're right, and the natural question that I think most people who don't operate local government all the time would ask is, well, if we've got reserves, why do we have to do efficiencies? Because the truth be told is that the world is changing in such a pace that there are services that may never look the same again, that might need further support later on down the line, whether it be in our social care markets and so forth. So, yes, it's a nest egg. Yes, it's going to help or give us some degree of insulation from the issues coming. However, we still need to be prudent with that. It isn't just a one-off stop to get out of jail, because there might be pressures coming. You know, when all this started in March, a few of us probably thought this would go on to about this time. It doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon, this crisis. Life is going to carry on being very difficult for a very long time, and we need to be prudent with the prudent savings that we've made, ironically. But I think it's important to stress that point, because it is an actual question to ask. If we've got that, why do we have to make efficiencies? The truth be told is because we don't know what else is coming around the corner, and we need to be prudent and intelligent with it.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Of course, the simple analogy for those that have got savings, you can only spend savings once. And that's pretty much what our reserves are. And equally, where we see comments online, well, why are you spending X amount of million doing whatever that particular subject is? Well, apart from the fact that money is put aside for that particular project, that project is underway, that project is nearly complete or whatever it is, and there are a significant number of capital projects that we do, so I'm not going to pick on one particular one, but again, if they were stopped, that's one-off money. It's not something that we can keep a service going for an indefinite period of time. And so with that, on page 63, we've got two recommendations, 1.1 and 1.2 in the chamber. All of us agreed with that. Agreed. Those remotely, I've got two nodding heads and two thumbs up. Thank you very much. I'll take them as agreed. So with that, Cabinet, thank you, and officers indeed, thank you very much for your attendance this evening. And I call the meeting to an end at 19:37. Thank you.